right, so this is Brett Looney from AWS Solutions Architect. Hello, Brett. How you going?
Hi, welcome. welcome to Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right. It's 11 a.m. in Perth on a Tuesday, and yeah, we're going live with a new webinar series that we're doing. My name's Daniel Linden, if you don't know me, from Transparency IT. We're a boutique IT recruitment agency here in Perth, and we're passionate about IT project success, which is why we're putting on this series, because we know that IT projects are successful only when the right people are involved and the right technology is involved. And what ultimately determines whether it's a success or not, though, is the impact it has on the business from a lasting, positive point of view. And that's not just the business, but the employees as well. So what I'm trying to do here is, I suppose, curate a bunch of IT professionals in Perth, like yourself, Brett, that can come and talk to us about topics, typically emerging tech type topics, buzz topics in the industry, but topics that end up being IT projects for businesses in Perth that a lot of IT managers, sometimes struggling with, sometimes successfully implementing. And people like yourself are seeing that at the coalface, at the cutting edge, sort of every day. So it'd be really good if you can share, your experiences around that, and particularly today where we're talking about public cloud. And I like your title, Brett, Cloudy with a Chance of Amazing. Having kids, and they're slightly older now. They're 11 and 13, but having kids, the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs reference is definitely one I know well. So yeah.
At least it wasn't a Frozen reference. Okay.
Sorry?
At least it wasn't a Frozen reference.
True. Now that is done ad infinitum, exactly. Yeah, seen enough of Frozen for a lifetime, that's for sure.
Cool.
If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to shoot them into the chat room, and I'll collate them, and we can ask Brett along the way or at the end. And Brett, I think you've got a presentation and slides and the whole shebang. So I will
Absolutely.
Pass it over to you. Let's go.
No problems. Thank you. Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those that don't know me, and you probably don't, my name's Brett. Hi, I work for a company called Amazon Web Services. If you don't know who AWS is, we are a division of Amazon, that company that you buy everything from. But we are the cloud computing arm. So we were formed in 2006. I've been working there for a bit over 5 years. I joined mid-2015, and I work in Perth. But we have over 1 million customers globally, and we are by far the largest cloud vendor in the world. As an example, some of our customers are Netflix, Airbnb, Qantas, all 4 major banks in Australia, and a huge raft of other ones. Being in Perth and being a mining town, I do a lot of work with the mining companies, and so again, people like Rio Tinto and Glencore and that sort of stuff. And I do actually work globally. COVID notwithstanding, you would normally find me on a plane somewhere or diving down a hole on a mine site. But generally, this year I've been grounded, which has been a really interesting experience. And I got to say, I'm actually not missing the travel too much, which is good. So
amazing what you can do over platforms like this. Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, tomorrow the AWS reInvent conference starts, which traditionally we normally have in Las Vegas. So normally I would be in Vegas this week at that. And now that is, of course, a virtual conference as well. So tomorrow we'll get a little busy and we'll have keynotes and all sorts of other amazing stuff will come out.
One less trip to Vegas.
Yeah, this is true.
Probably not such a bad thing.
It's not such a bad thing, except every year I make a pilgrimage there and I drive fast cars on the track. I'm actually missing it. So Lamborghinis and Ferraris and things like that, the cars that you could never afford to own.
Oh, wow.
So that's yeah, it is a bit of a bummer, but hey, I'll just have to contain my disappointment and go back next time. So to the titles there that you saw, funnily enough, I was sitting down when we actually created this presentation. I was sitting with Sarah Bassett, who's our state manager here in Perth for AWS, and these were our alternate titles for this particular presentation. So we went through a few, and a few of them we were kind of joking around, but it's important to kind of brainstorm this. But the reason we did this presentation was because we talk about our customer successes a lot, but what we don't tend to talk about a lot are the lessons that our customers learn along the way. And so, as you can see there, I particularly like the how to win friends, influence the cloud type thing. And Sarah having 3 kids was very, very good on the lessons from cloud parenthood one as well, because sometimes it does actually feel like that.
Yeah, totally.
But as you can see, this was kind of where we were going. And so the theme here is we always talk to customers about why they should move to cloud. And the big thing about this is that it can be cheaper for you. Again, if you can get greater agility, you can do things quicker, again, if you use it the right way. And there's a bunch of other benefits as well. We see huge increases in innovation, massive decreases in the time taken to do things when you do things in the cloud, which you simply cannot do with your normal IT. But you have to kind of release the creativity in your people and enable them. And this is kind of where this presentation is going, and I'll go into more details with that. But a great example here in Perth, for example, is Woodside. So Australia's largest oil and gas producer. They do a lot of analysis of underground reservoirs and things like that. It used to take 2 to 3 months for them to do an analysis of a particular reservoir. They can now get that done in hours. Now, that was not a result that they got overnight, by the way. It's taken a few years of work inside the company to do that. But what it means is that they can spin up clusters of tens of thousands of computers that they can use, run them in parallel in order to solve problems, and then when they're done, throw them away because they don't need them anymore. And you simply can't do that on premises, and you can't justify that sort of spend. But for them, it means that they can capitalize on their exploration much, much quicker, which is really good.
Fantastic. Yep.
So a little quote for you. Everyone's seen this quote. This actually isn't Albert Einstein. It's actually from a 1980s novel, it turns out, but everyone thinks it's Albert Einstein.
We're not misquoting, are we?
No, we would never do that, but of course.
Against any quote, and it was valid.
Right, exactly. And so it isn't. And this is one of the big things in IT, right? And I used to run my own IT company. And what happened was we actually used to build out a bunch of processes in order to make ourselves more efficient. And one of the things we never did was go back. And it is going to be more expensive. And we don't want that. We want you to spend less money. We want you to have a good experience coming in. And the most amazing thing here is that it turns out that computers are really, really dumb, right? They have 2 fingers and they can count really, really fast, but they're not really that smart. But they are very good at doing the same thing over and over again without getting bored. And that's completely the opposite of what people do. People are really bad at doing the same things over and over again. Witness airline pilots, for example. One of the reasons that flying now is so safe is because pilots use checklists. And the checklists are there to help them do the same thing over and over again. But the other reason that flying is so safe is because they've taken a lot of the things that the pilots used to do and they have automated them. And that way the computers and the mechanisms on the plane do the work for them, and it makes the whole system much, much safer. Now in IT for businesses, we can do the same thing, okay? Why repeat the same thing over and over again? Why have people do the same thing over and over again? Why not just get the computers to do that? And it used to be really, really hard to do this in an on-premises world. And again, one of the reasons I joined AWS, because I used to build data centers. I used to build these systems for customers, and it turns out it's really, really hard, okay? And now we can just give it to the cloud. Just get us to do it for you, because we have people there who are going to do this. And when you can automate things, and bear in mind that when we were trying to automate stuff for our customers, we would have 30 different systems that we would have to talk to. There was the server vendor and the network vendor and the actual software vendor and all the bits in between. And if we wanted to make one piece of automation, we'd have to talk to all of those. And that was simply impossible. In the cloud, we give you one place to come to, and it makes it so that you can easily automate a lot of your IT. And again, this is not something you would do overnight. One of my customers here in Perth, Australian Financial Group, so they handle about 12% of the mortgages in the country. They went on a huge journey across 3 years of moving to the cloud and automating their IT systems. And at the beginning, they measured how much of the time their IT team was spending delivering benefit to the business, like actually doing cool stuff rather than keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
And it turns out they were spending 85% of their time keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
Now, and this is continually improving, now they spend less than 40% of their time keeping the lights on and 60% of their time actually doing cool stuff for the business. And I was chatting to their CFO a little while ago because I had this story from the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, and I went like, I need to confirm this. And I happened to meet the CFO and I said, hey, tell me what it's like. Is this story really true? And he said, yeah, it's amazing. Now I can go to IT and ask them for something, like some improvement or some change, and I'll get it in 2 to 4 weeks rather than 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
So
it's really changed the way the IT department is viewed then in these organizations, because like you say, they're not just there now to keep the lights on or the guys with the screwdriver when, you know, something breaks down or my PC doesn't work or whatever. It's gone far beyond that to see how they can enable, you know, business to work in a better way and become, I suppose, the thought leaders around that. And you know, absolutely. I suppose that's then, you know, from if I put my recruitment hat on for a second, you know, I'd be selling my candidates, you know, this is the future. This is what you've got to look to. You've got to have, you know, forward thinking, a vision about the business and where you can go and how you can lead the business through technological improvement, not just, you know, keep the existing tools running. So I think, yeah, from a candidate perspective, from an IT professional perspective, that's the way, you've got to be thinking these days.
Yep, and exactly right. And a lot of people think, oh, if I'm going to automate, I'm going to lose my job. And again, the AFG example, and they're not the only ones. No, the team actually expanded because they could do more things, and the business saw value in what IT was doing. So automation is absolutely key, and putting stuff in the cloud actually makes that so much easier. And yet, I still see so many companies, they put stuff in the cloud and then they do what we call click ops. Right, which is where people are just clicking around and doing stuff. And it's like, sure, you need to do that to understand the processes, but what you should be doing is automating it. Now, I could stand here and talk about automation all day, but I shouldn't.
That's all right. So look, I was actually just going to, you know, I'm fascinated by the whole automation topic, and actually particularly also as it applies to airlines and airplanes. I read a really interesting book by a pilot, actually, who was stymied by automation somewhere, you know, between Singapore and Perth, and ended up having to land in Exmouth, a big, you know, 787 landing in Exmouth. Anyway, that's by the by. But my point was going to be, I totally agree. It's made, you know, airline travel so much safer. I believe it's going to do the same thing with cars as well. However, I don't think it changes our inability to stomach the occasions where automation, you know, goes wrong and you know and kills people. You know, we have, even though the aggregate result of deaths on the road or deaths in the air is much lower now because of automation, our ability to stomach being killed by robots is not great. And I think that in itself will drive, you know, better automation and continual improvement in safe automation. And I imagine it's the same for you know, data in the cloud as well.
Absolutely, definitely. Yeah. Look, and an Amazon example for you, right? And it turns out that automating things and doing them more often is actually safer than doing things less often where you're not practiced at it. So think of any large IT upgrade that anyone's ever done, which are all very, very scary, and you only do them once or twice a year, and generally it doesn't go well, because it's so big and it's so complicated, and you don't do it that often, and therefore things just don't work right. Whereas if you've got things that are automated and you're doing them every hour or every day, they tend to go better because you know the process much better. And software deployments at Amazon, and this is now Amazon Retail, so think of the Amazon Retail website. In 2013, and so these numbers are now bigger, but in 2013, we were making a software deployment to the Amazon Retail website on average once every 8 seconds during the business day. Okay, wow. And we were deploying software to somewhere between 10 and 30,000 machines. And the only reason we can do that is automation. And because it happens so often, and we continually refining that process, it gets safer and safer and safer every time. Now, does automation break occasionally? Absolutely. Things fail all the time, and I have a slide about that a little bit later. But the more you can plan for that, the better that it goes, right?
Sure.
Rather than having people running around with their hair on fire. Metaphorically, of course.
Yes,
okay.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. For
okay.
those of us who are blessed with it. Yeah.
Right. It's that usual thing. You're running around in an emergency doing stuff.
Yeah.
So to the slide that's on screen now, this is the other big thing about the cloud. We always talk about the fact that you can scale up. So your ability, if you're a retailer, to react to a retail event and have more resources available so that you can serve more customers. And again, if you think of the Netflix example, by the way, of how people come home at night and then they start streaming things and Netflix has to scale up. What people tend to forget is that you can also scale back down again. And we absolutely encourage our customers to do this, particularly if you're moving resources from your on-premises data center into the cloud. Generally, when they're on premises, they're sized to be this big because you need them to run all the time. You don't want to be upgrading them. You want them to run for 3 years. And so there's actually a lot of headroom here. There's a lot of spare capacity that's just going to waste. We encourage people to squeeze and scrimp and run those resources hot in the cloud. You don't hurt the computers by making them more busy, as it turns out. There's no pain threshold there. And it's cheaper for you. You can actually save so much money by right-sizing. And yet it's amazing how many customers don't do this. And we have teams of people who go talk to our customers like, we can actually see, because we control the underlying hardware, we can see that your machines are only being used 35%. So why don't we turn them all down? And some customers are scared because they think that as Amazon, we're trying to lock them into some other contract or something like that. And we're not. We genuinely want our customers to save money, because we understand that happy customers tend to come back, and we want long-term relationships with them. So again, in the cloud means that you can spin things up and then you can take them away. The Woodside example earlier, they can run their analytics and then throw those computers away. They don't need to have any capital investment there. They don't need to spend that money permanently. It also means that during the week, if you have resources that are running during the day to service your user population, you may not need them at night. Turn them off. I know of a large customer here in Australia who overnight turns off all of the software development resources that their devs use and turns it off on the weekend as well. And they save themselves $120,000 a year.
Yeah, right.
And it's really that simple.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Because it's our world. If you give it back, it's our problem to deal with. You don't have to pay for it anymore.
It'd be nice if you could do that with your office rent.
yeah. You could just rent it out to someone else at night, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's laws against that. So to a little bit of administrative for you, what I see lots of customers do is they move into the cloud and they go, the IT department says, no, we have to control this. We have to whitelist everything that our users can use in the cloud. And this is actually not so smart. Because last month we had over 175 services. In the last month, we've launched about 4 new services. Our conference starts tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier. I don't know what we're going to launch there, but I know that I'm going to be really, really busy learning stuff. Whitelisting, it makes it really, really difficult, and it also stifles innovation. It stops your users from doing stuff that might actually be really, really handy. So how can you fix that? In our world, you can put guardrails around what people do. So you can say, yeah, I want you to be able to use all the services, but I want to restrict how you connect them to the internet, or I want to filter all of that traffic, or I want to stop you from spending $100,000 all at once on running lots and lots of computers. So I'm going to put a spend limit in place for you, something like that. But that way you can really get the innovation out of the teams to go away and do stuff and to experiment and to bring benefit into the business, because that's what they can't do today with traditional IT, right? That purchasing cycle means that they go out and they go, okay, I want to experiment with something. I want to try out and see if I can solve this problem. And it takes 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months to get that equipment in place in order for them to play with it rather. And then that's a capital asset you've got to find some other use for. But if you've whitelisted them, giving them a little account where they can go out and spend, again, $100, for example, to try and solve a problem, is great. I had a case 2 years ago with a customer where we were experimenting around for a couple of days, and we solved a problem that was costing about $120,000 a month. And we managed to get it down to the point where it was costing $70 a month to solve that problem.
Oh, wow.
So that's a pretty good win, I think.
Yeah, totally. And that's through allowing the employees to be innovative with their cloud services that they're allowed to use. And that's what you mean by whitelisting, allowing them to use certain services within the cloud and just go, do whatever they need to do.
That's right.
Yeah.
Look, and I wouldn't go down that path of whitelisting, because it means you've got to go there. And I've seen customers want to write documentation about, here are the 4 services that you can use, and specifically the way that you can use them. And the problem with that is we're innovating so quickly, we're adding new things so fast that might be handy, that those administrators can't keep up. It takes them, a month to write a document and then certify it and go, here you go, now you can use it. And that's a month of opportunity cost that's gone. It's much better to say, look, I'm going to put guardrails around you, maybe from a spend perspective, and put some security rules in place to stop you doing anything that might, violate, confidence and have any user data exposed. But I'm going to let you use all the services and just see what happens.
So, and are they, those guardrails, are they mainly policies, or are they actually, actual part of the technology that, part of the, or a combination of both?
Yeah, so we have actually a tool called config, and as a thing called config rules, and you can say, these are the rules that I want to apply to this person's account, so that they can't do certain things. And you can get extremely restrictive, but you can basically say, yeah, you know what, I don't want you to connect this thing to the internet, and that way they can play around with private data and not do stuff. So you can stop people shooting themselves in the foot, as it were, which is good. The other thing that people bring up in a big way is security. So that QR code, by the way, is a presentation from one of our heads of security inside Amazon, a guy named Eric Brandwine, and he talks about the philosophy of security at Amazon and how they automated their own jobs. I actually recommend you watch this, even if you're not interested in security, because it talks about how they started out writing really, really bad code to help automate their jobs, and how over the course of years that got a lot better. But there's no way they could have scaled without that. But to the whole security story, we have so many customers who are like, oh, I don't really know. I don't think we can move to cloud. I don't think it's that secure. I can say hand on heart, you are, and our customers say this as well, you are more secure in the cloud than in your own data center, because we have all sorts of security assertion. So we are PCI certified. We're HIPAA compliant for a lot of our services. We're IRAP, Australian government certified for workloads. And I can say pretty much, I can go out there on a limb and say that your own data center does not have those certifications. So we do that all the time. All of those services that come under those programs are certified in that way, so that customers can use us and be happy that their underlying infrastructure is secure. That doesn't mean that if you start posting public stuff out on your website that you're not responsible for that. You are. We have a thing called a shared security model, where we're responsible for that underlying infrastructure and the customers are still responsible for their applications. But security is so much easier in the cloud to get right. Again, because it is one single thing that you control, rather than, oh, I have to worry about the security of my firewall, my network, my server, my storage, my backups, all that sort of stuff. It's all in one place to do that, right? All of those things, okay? And we give you tools to automate this as much as possible. The other great thing of working at Amazon, and this is not a sell job for jobs here, but we are hiring, by the way, is that things change so quickly here in terms of the features that we bring out. One of the things we love doing is talking to our customers and saying, hey, what would you like to see next in our services? Or what does this service not do that you really want it to do? And I've seen hundreds in my time here, and they're not the only ones, but hundreds of individual requests that we have put into those teams building those services that have come true. It's like Christmas every day of the year, and you get all these new features, and it's really, really good. So we love hearing from customers saying, actually, I can't use this because it doesn't do that. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, well, we'll take that feedback back, and we'll see if we can do something about that. And that's not to say that we deliver features necessarily the next day, although I'm not kidding, that has happened purely because someone else has asked for it previously and they've worked on it. But
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing happens, which is great. So security is not a blocker, and I would say that your security team have to be brought on the journey. I've spent many years often building relationships with security teams in very large organizations and helping them to understand that they can be in control of the security of their users in the cloud, but they don't have to get in their way. They can be enablers rather than blockers, which is a good thing. I mentioned this before with innovation, so I won't talk to this too much here, but basically the idea here is that if you give people the flexibility of operating in the cloud, where they can experiment, where they can try things out, it means that you really do see a big result with this. We've done so many surveys and actually looked at customers before and after type numbers, and when people adopt the right operating model in the cloud, this really makes a huge difference. Consider this, for example, and this is not just about software dev or anything like that. One of my customers, they have built an automation scheme where they can stand up a copy of their entire environment. So literally all the company's IT assets, and it takes about an hour. And what this means is they can run a disaster recovery test in an hour, and it costs them about $150. And so anytime the board comes down and says, well, does our DR plan for IT work? They go, well, hang on a second, let me just press this button. Press the button, and it goes away and does the whole thing again, and they come back in an hour and go, yep. And not only that, they've wrapped tests around it to make sure it's actually working. Now, that's a very traditional IT thing, but you simply can't do that. I mean, how could you test your DR in that way if you're on premises? You'd have to have a complete copy of a data center somewhere. But it also means if you're the retailer, and you're expecting this big event coming up, Black Friday is coming up, and you need to make sure your website's going to survive it. You can, in the cloud, you can test your website to 100% of the load that you're expecting. And then you could go further and say, actually, I'm going to test it to 200% of the load, just in case the people up in marketing decide they're going to put an amazing deal and everybody in Australia hits our website.
Sure.
So
yeah,
you
good
can,
point. Yeah.
Right.
The advantage of testing, and given what we've seen happen over years, where it can go wrong, i.e., online voting, etc. That, or the census. I'm thinking of things like that. It's a good point that there should be no reason why you can't load test stuff at least.
Definitely. The other big thing that we see with customers, and I work with lots of large mining customers, and the culture there is we want to buy stuff off the shelf. We want you to give us a package. Now, if you've been in business for a while, you'll know that anytime you buy something off the shelf, it never does exactly what you want it to do. It just doesn't. Okay, and you actually have to spend time customizing it. And so what we encourage customers to do nowadays is dabble a little bit in the build culture. Okay, go out and build the little tools that you need. I don't know about your business, but my business used to run on formulas and numbers that were copied from one spreadsheet to another and modified and to another and modified and another and modified. And this was the report that came out at the other end, right? That's great, except I can count on more fingers than I have the number of times that got messed up. Why not choose that as your first automation candidate?
My cash flow report every week is much like that, which she runs. So.
Right. So if you're going to build something nice and small and simple like that, because it isn't something you can get off the shelf.
Yeah.
Now you aren't going to go out and build a spreadsheet program. You're not going to go out and build a database. You're not going to go out and build an ERP or something like that. But we've seen huge successes with customers who take those systems, and now that everything is programmable, everything has an API, has an interface that you can talk to it. You can get the information out, you can drag it out and do something useful with it. And that's absolutely huge. So definitely consider building small solutions to start with. Okay. Now that said, you can go crazy with this, and in a good way. And again, in the Woodside example, they've spent the last 2 years building a program they call Fuse. And Fuse is an augmented reality reality system where you can put on some goggles and you can walk around their gas plant, and you can walk up to gas flow meters and taps and things like that, and you can actually look at them and look at the values that are there right now and look at those historical values. And they've built this because it turns out that they don't want people on site because it's not safe. They have, and I'm not kidding, been building robots to go out there and actually turn valves and do stuff as well. And they have done this because nobody else on the planet had this off the shelf. They had to build it, but they saw it as a massive investment in safety, but also scalability and making those plants more efficient. So yeah, very, very cool stuff happening over here in sleepy little Perth. Who knew, right? The other thing that people come to me a lot is they go, I'm worried about getting locked in. I worry about getting locked into a particular cloud vendor. I want to go multi-cloud. That's what I want to do. I appreciate the honesty when people come and talk to me about this, but then I have to ask them the question. So how many different operating systems do you run on the laptops in the office? How many different phone systems do you have in your office? Are you not worried about lock-in there? You know, how many different programs do you run for your ERP? Are you not worried about failure of your ERP? Why shouldn't you run 2? If you're going to run 0, shouldn't you run something else just in case? And it turns out that this is not something that anybody sat down and thought about too hard, because the reason you don't run, for example, 2 ERPs is because the amount of time it takes you to do things twice is ridiculous. The amount of time you spend training your people to do things twice in 2 different ways is absolutely crazy. But then they go, oh no, that's okay. The cloud's all software, right? I'll run a cloud broker and I'll put all my requests to the broker and it can spread my resources across both clouds. Absolutely, that sort of stuff exists. But now what you're doing is you're limiting yourself to a lowest common denominator. You'll only get those features that are the same on both of those cloud vendors. Now, I'm not here in this particular case to sell AWS to you, t-shirt notwithstanding. But I would much rather my customers do one thing and they do one thing really well, rather than do 2 or 3 things in a really mediocre way. Okay, it's like build up your skill sets and do this. Pick one, and we want you to make the right decision. And that's not a trick question. I'm saying, you know, you're obviously going to evaluate your vendors and do this, but and we would love you to choose us, please. That's great. But pick one and stick to it, because you'll get so much more benefit out of doing that, both from a money perspective and a consistency perspective and doing that. So I actually don't think that lock-in is a thing. And again, we don't have contracts with our customers. You don't come to us and sign like a 12-month contract to say, yeah, I'll be here for a while and this is, you know, how much I'm going to spend and stuff like that. You pay month on month, and you only pay for what you use. Again, shrinking means you pay less. And if you want to take your data and you want to move somewhere else, there's no contract, there's no lock-in. We don't stop people from moving their data and their services out. We don't want you to, but it's absolutely a complete option. And this comes to this thing. Oh yeah, it did break the animation on this slide. There you go. Whatever. That little plan for failure thing is supposed to slide across. Doesn't matter. Often people say, I want to do multi-cloud because there's a risk. There's a risk that Amazon is going to fail, and it'll fall over, and my business will go down. And you know what? Our CTO, Werner Vogels, he has a saying. He says that things fail all the time. There are 2 states for computer hardware: stuff that's failed and stuff that's about to fail. Okay. And so we encourage our customers to plan for failure. We're not perfect, but that said, we also plan for failure internally because we know that our systems are going to fail at some stage. So we run drills all the time. So a great example: about 3 years ago, we actually had a failure. We lost a complete data center, one of 3 in Sydney. And due to a storm that came through and it blattered the power grid and the stuff that's supposed to kick in all the uninterruptible power supplies that turned out were interruptible, and it took out a whole data center. So the 2 things that came out of that was, 1, we were prepared for it. We had 80% of that data center back up and running in 2.5 hours. And there were other people in the same area in similar data centers who were also knocked out, who took 2 weeks to come back because they don't plan for failure and we do. The second thing is we encourage our customers to use the fact that we have multiple data centers. We actually call them availability zones, but this is not the time or place to go into that. And we say, why don't you run your application in 2 or maybe even in 3 availability zones? And that way, when something happens here and this one fails, these other ones will pick up. And there's a great blog post from a good friend of mine, James Bromberger, who works at Modus. He was doing some work for LandGate. And in fact, they had their application, the LandGate application, set up in 2 of our availability zones, so 2 data centers. They had a primary and a secondary. Guess which one failed? The primary. That was where it was. It took under 5 minutes, and this was a Sunday afternoon, under 5 minutes for the secondary to become primary, and it just did it all by itself, and no one even noticed. And so, yes, things are going to fail. It's just a fact of life. Computers fail all the time, and you know what? We encourage you to use the automation so that you don't notice, or if you do notice, it's only for a very short period of time. And my job as a solutions architect is actually to help people design things in that way. Well, that's part of the job. Also, and I realize we're running up close to time here as well. We encourage people not to think of the cloud just as another data center. Generally speaking, the very first thing people will do is what we call lift and shift. They'll take their resources from on-premises and put it in the cloud, which is great. That's a totally valid first move. But we have lots and lots of cloud native services, things that you can run your applications on where when you're not running, it doesn't just cost you a little bit, it costs you nothing. Things that automatically scale up and scale back down for you. So we encourage customers to use those native cloud tools because they reduce what we call the undifferentiated heavy lifting. So the things that you do to maintain in the IT world, a queuing system, or a storage system or something like that. No, use the cloud native ones because we just do that for you. Okay. So again, there's a lot of stuff here to unpack, and I won't go into huge amounts of detail here because I'm not sure how technical people are on the call, but I could drown you in details for the next week. We won't do that. Finally, a lot of the cloud stuff is actually about culture. Already talked about whitelisting and giving people room to move and room to innovate. And it's about trusting that people are going to go and do the right thing. But again, it is trust and verify. You can put models and policies in place to go like, yeah, that's you shouldn't be doing that. I'm just gonna stop you from there. Education is everything. We have lots of training. Again, another big part of my job is going out with people and talking about what the best way is to use our services. And that's really key. A lot of my best work is done on whiteboards, talking about stuff, which is cool. But people also need to be given room to fail. And failure is just another thing about learning, okay, which is, that's not a good way of doing that, right? And the other thing is to remove the gatekeepers. Again, we see customers treat the cloud like a traditional data center, which is where I have to fill out a form and get approval from my manager, and then it goes to IT and they have to approve it, and I have to fill in, this other bit of paper that's like, 2 pages long in order to get one server that I can run my little utility on and try something. In the cloud, it's like, here you go, here's your account that you can play in. It's limited to $100 a month. You can't do anything else with it, but otherwise go for your life. Run your little experiments and play with your tools. And you get the best value out of people when they're free to think and do stuff.
Totally. And when they know they can't really break anything if they're sandboxed like that.
Yeah. Exactly. It's always nervous though when you do click the button and something else goes wrong over there and you're like, oh, was that me? Okay, hopefully not. Right. So this is literally the last slide, and this is just a summary. It is totally possible to go into the cloud and spend more money than you spend on-prem, and we want to help customers not do that. And the ways you do that are treating it like it's your own data center. So run things smaller, run them cheaper. But again, the benefits that you'll see from going into the cloud and avoiding those and automating and using those native tools is that you will move faster. And again, the Woodside example, the Australian Financial Group example, the Netflix examples, they are not unique. There's lots of other customers who get huge benefits out of taking a different look at how to use IT resources in the cloud, which is hence the title of this whole presentation.
Mm.
So that's it. Thank you for listening to me rant on. Daniel, thank you for engaging. That's all cool.
Yeah.
If there's any questions, we can happily take them now. I think we've got 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's excellent. So yeah, absolutely. Fire any questions away in the chat if you've got any, and I can curate any of those. But in the meantime, Brett, I've got some questions too. Now this is the fast money, mate. This is where you earn your stripes. Not really your money, but for all the big bucks we're paying you. So in 30 seconds or less, how do you sell it to the board? What does the board need to know, both from a sales perspective, also from a liability perspective?
I think security is a big seller, as in we can be more secure. Scale, as in we can do things bigger if we need to. And cost reduction. And again, those three things I would say are kind of just footnotes. The big thing is, if you go through this, and again, it's not day one, you won't see this stuff overnight, but longer term, you will see benefits, as in IT is more responsive to the business. The example of AFG, the 2 to 4 week type turnaround on responses. The ability to be more agile, the ability for the business to go, hey, we want to go off and talk to these other new customers over here. How long is it going to take us to get a system to do that? And it's like, we can, if it's really urgent, we can do that next week. Type
I think that's a really good point. And at the same time, they're really remarketing internally the IT department as well, and changing that positioning from, we're the fix-it guys to we're the enablers. Yeah, we make stuff happen for the business. Excellent. Yep. Donuts, glazed or hot cinnamon?
Cinnamon. Yeah, definitely. Plain and simple.
Yep, totally with you there. Excellent. How do you resource the IT team for a cloud project typically?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, right? You actually want a mix of people with that deep experience, people who've done it before, but also people who are, and I'll use the word young, but I really mean young of mind in terms of curious, willing to explore, willing to learn. Interestingly, my own experience. I actually started life as a little bit of a software developer, but didn't actually do that much longer than that. But that ability to write just a little bit of code has helped me so much later on in doing that automation piece. And I would encourage, and I think you need those people who are curious, and bring them in as juniors, I guess. I don't know that's the right term, but then upskill them, and you end up with people who have a career path which is amazing.
Brilliant. Yep. Excellent. And what happens when we feed you caffeine?
I annoy people. I don't drink coffee. I actually stopped drinking Coke, as in Coca-Cola, not the white stuff. I don't really drink that. Probably about 20 years ago, some friends of mine said, you're addicted to that stuff, and I went, no, I'm not. Let me show you. So I jumped off it, and now when they want to have a party, they give me a bottle of it, and yeah, that doesn't end well for them. I'm normally getting them back out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh wow, the things you can do on straight Coke, eh?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, look, I think we're coming up to our time limit. So thanks so much, Brett. That was fantastic. I think that was a great overview of what an IT leader needs to know to be successful in a move to the cloud. I think you've definitely nailed that brief, and I really appreciate it. And thanks for kicking off this Business Impact series.
No problems at all. Absolute pleasure. Thank you to everybody for listening in. Hopefully you got some value out of it. Yeah. Otherwise, my email address is there. You're more than welcome to email me and ask me random questions. That is awesome. Pretty much the description of my job.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we've got